This is a plant that got added to the game literally last week. Of course, nearly the same design and name as Snapdragon from PvZ2C, but function-wise, it's very different, having some insane strengths against tanky zombies while struggling against the smallest that spawn in huge numbers. So today, I wanted to see if it could solo all of PvZ2 if I maxed it out. But before we begin, let me show you all the rules. Only Volt Snapdragon, no power-ups or Zen Garden, skip all levels that force the use of another plant, pre-placed plants are fine, and lastly, coins earned throughout the challenge can be used to buy plant food, but no replaying levels to farm coins. Okay, that's all for the rules. Let's begin. We start on day 1 of Ancient Egypt, where first I'm going to go over the stats of the max level Volt Snapdragon compared to its level 1 stats. The first big change is within its sun cost, where it goes from 200 sun at level 1 to 125 sun at max level. Its recharge timer goes from 7 seconds to 4.5 seconds. Its health goes from 500 to 1100. And this is a pretty interesting one because normally plants have 300 health at level 1 and then 900 at max level, but this guy for some reason has 200 extra health. But anyways, skipping damage for now, I'm gonna go to the plant food power, which goes from 150 to 200 damage. And since the Volt Snapdragon is from the filament family, or like the lightning family, it does have a lightning chain between zombies, which the damage the lightning chain deals at level 1 goes from 50% to 100% at max level. And then the number of zombies it can chain to goes from 3 to 5, so a pretty decent buff. We then also have the mastery buffs for it being mastery 200, which are basically a 20% chance to plant food boost whenever you plant the Volt Snapdragon, and then also a 200% pierce buff, which is basically a damage boost. But now let's get to the most interesting and powerful stat of the Volt Snapdragon, which is its damage, and more specifically how the damage happens. Basically, when it attacks, it shoots this laser beam like thing, and then over time you're gonna see against different zombies like gargantuars, the laser will start getting bigger and bigger. And if you look at the numbers under the damage section, you'll see that each time the laser beam gets bigger, the Volt Snapdragon deals more damage. And especially if you look at the 4th column of the damage where the laser beam is at its peak, you'll see that it deals an insane amount of damage. Like at level 1 it deals 1000, but then if you look at its max level stats, it deals 11,550, which is kind of unheard of for many other plant. Even plants like Pokra don't deal this much damage. But there of course are two things that semi-balance it out, one of which is that it can only attack one zombie at a time with its main attack, and the second is that it takes 6 seconds to build up to that 4th phase of the laser. So with the normal level Volt Snapdragon, the only time you might even see that 4th phase is against a gargantuar. And that's basically all the stat changes for the Volt Snapdragon from level 1 to max level. So let's get back into the gameplay. Most levels are pretty easy as they don't hold any special challenges, so the Snapdragon is able to clear them, but you are going to notice that in a lot of levels I do end up losing a couple of lawnmowers because the Snapdragon just costs too much. Oh, and also you're going to just hear me call the Volt Snapdragon Snapdragon basically the entire video because the Volt Snapdragon is a lot to say, and Snapdragon just sounds more fitting. Day 13 had 2 columns of mold colonies in the back, which can be a little annoying because they limit how much I can stall with the Snapdragon, but again, as these are the earlier levels, we didn't really need to stall that much. Day 17 was another challenge where we could only place 14 plants on the lawn, and it's nearly impossible that we even get enough sun for that many Snapdragons, so we didn't have to worry too much about this challenge. Levels like day 20 are very nice because they give us sunflowers to work with, so we don't really have to stall the levels in the beginning, and instead we can just spam our Snapdragons in the front, taking out all the zombies immediately. Day 23, we see our first gargantuar in the very top lane, and you're going to notice that it kind of got obliterated in that first tile. That's exactly what the Snapdragon's for, taking out the tanky zombies. But now we'd made it to Ancient Egypt day 24, which is the last level, and it's also a prepare your defenses level. So let's prepare some defenses. And just like that, we'd be in all of Ancient Egypt using just a max level Snapdragon, but the levels are a little bit more tricky in that. And I only say they're a little bit more tricky, mainly because of the lanes, like the middle lane, where half of it's missing. So you randomly have to end up accounting for zombies like the Pirate Swingers. But even then, it's nothing too difficult. Oh, and I haven't really mentioned it yet, but if you look up front, you'll see what the max level Volt Snapdragon's plant food does. It's almost the same thing as the normal Snapdragon and the cold Snapdragon, but I would argue it's even better because it ticks and deals damage to zombies several times over the span of a couple seconds, which can come in very handy in certain situations. But I'll mention in those situations when they come up, because again, we're storming through the pirate seas with a couple of annoying levels like day 6, where I ended up losing 4 of my lawnmowers because the zombies caught me off guard, but again, I was able to recover. And I'd argue that the first challenging level was Pirate Seas day 15, where we have to protect these flowers in the back from being trampled on, because like I mentioned, in nearly every level, some of the zombies get past and always make it to the lawnmower, and this time I can't really allow that to happen, because if they get there, they trample over the flowers. And I think normally this level would have been extremely difficult, but you might have noticed that at the beginning of the level, there was a 3-peater way in the back. And that's because this level just gives you a 3-peater to start off, so I was able to take advantage of that and shovel it, getting a pretty decent amount of sun, which in return allowed me to get my Snapdragons down faster than the zombies could make it to the flowers. And so the level was eventually completed without many complications. Day 16 also had me worried because we have to protect the spring bean in the front, and since there's only really those 2 lanes up front, I was worried that the Volt Snapdragons that I placed up there might get overwhelmed, but this level showed me that the Zapdragon is capable of destroying most zombies if they're moving at a slow pace, and the real threat would be the grouped faster ones like the chickens of the Wild West. So for now, we defended pretty easily. Day 17 also had me worried at the beginning because it's one of the challenges where you have to destroy a certain amount of zombies in a certain amount of time, and my main worry was the range of the Volt Snapdragon and the 3 tiles up top that were half missing, so I thought there was a small chance that they wouldn't get enough zombies that they could actually attack. But then within the first big wave, a pretty insane amount of zombies were sent in all at the same time, and I actually achieved the requirement way faster than I expected, and then all we needed was to beat the level. Our next stop is day 22 because this is just one of those levels that I always have to show. So let's first prepare defenses. Day 23 was actually a pretty scary level because one, we had to protect these flowers that were placed in the middle, unlike the ones that were placed way far in the back in that previous level, and especially this time I didn't have an extra plant that I could shovel up for sun, so I had to maximize my stalling for the first zombie so I could collect as much sun as possible. And then I tried doing the same thing for the second zombie as well, but then the Zapdragon that I planted accidentally plant fooded, taking it out, which did kind of make the pace of the level faster. But after a little bit more time passed, I realized that the stalling that I had done was enough because I was able to get down a Zapdragon in every single lane. And what was even better about this level is that you're able to place them right on top of the flowers. And I haven't mentioned it yet, but if you're able to get down one Zapdragon in every single lane, it basically just guarantees your win. So that's exactly what happened this time, which leads us to day 24, which is the last level that we play of the Pirate Seas. And this one's basically a scarier version of day 16 where you have to protect the spring beans from the incoming zombies. And there's basically 2 zombies that are a threat to the spring beans, one of which are the seagull zombies, but they're actually pretty easily taken care of. And the second one is the pirate swinging zombie, who is more of a threat since it can land right on top of the spring bean before the Volt Snapdragon can even take it out. And thankfully, like you saw there, the spring beans do have an attack of their own, so they're able to displace one of them, but then they go into a mini sleep, so you have to be careful for that time period that the pirate zombies don't actually eat away at them. There is also the imp cannons within the level, which actually are a pretty big threat, just like the pirate swingers, but I was getting pretty lucky that the imps were kind of just falling into the water, and even when the cannons would explode, they wouldn't land directly on top of the spring beans, which had basically meant that we beat the entirety of the Pirate Seas using just a max level Volt Snapdragon. But let's see how it holds up against the chickens of the Wild West is very helpful in some ways, but at the same time annoying in other ways. It was helpful in the fact that it had mine carts, and if we ever were in trouble, I could just make use of them to maneuver my Zapdragons around, but I didn't really ever need to use them as they were sort of just a temporary solution to our sun problem, and I already knew it was possible to get down 5 Zapdragons within a level because of all the previous levels. And like I've already mentioned a couple times, the main annoyance within the Wild West is the chicken wranglers, but as I've done this challenge many times, I knew the best solution to go up against these guys was to stall out the first few zombies as long as possible, because what we want to do is build up enough sun and get down a Zapdragon in every single lane before we see our first chicken wrangler. Because let's say a chicken wrangler came out and then one of my Zapdragons attacked it with a couple of my lanes being completely empty, it would basically give the chickens a free passageway to my lawnmowers. Since I can't really use any of my power-ups and the only attacking plant I can use is the Volt Snapdragon, who I don't have enough sun for. So it's best to make sure that you have all the lanes covered covered before you go up against a big threat. But I'm not gonna lie, as I saw the first chicken wrangler approach in the very bottom lane, I had a good feeling that one Snapdragon in each lane wasn't gonna be enough, so I decided to double place in the lanes that I knew the chickens were gonna spawn in. But for some reason, this chicken wrangler in particular decided to spawn all of his chickens in one lane and just completely ignored the lane on top of itself. So the chickens kind of just tore through both of my Snapdragons that were in that lane and ended up taking the lawnmower even though I tried to heavily prepare for him. So my first priority after this was again clogging up that lane, since now I didn't have a lawnmower and was kind of in threatening territory. And when I saw a second chicken wrangler in that very bottom lane approach once again, I thought that it might have been GG's. But if you remember, I mentioned that the Snapdragon has a plant food ability that ticks a couple of times over a few seconds, and it comes in handy in certain situations, and this situation is exactly that, because his plant food ability is able to just tear through the chickens. And seeing it just shred through the chicken wrangler in that bottom lane, I knew that this power up was going to come in very handy in some of the future levels. And as for now, this level had basically been defeated as we'd overplaced our Snapdragons, and there was practically nothing that was going to get through the defenses. Day 11 had an interesting restriction where we could only use 500 sun in total, so it was one of the only levels that we actually decided to use the minecart since we're kind of just forced. And my strategy was just clogging 3 lanes with Snapdragons very far up front, and then managing the other 2 lanes with a Snapdragon that was on the minecart. And using this, we pretty easily won. But now we had day 14 to deal with, which was another level that contained the chickens. And again, this time I'd gotten a Snapdragon down in every single lane before a single chicken wrangler came in, and nearly had 2 in every single lane before a pretty decent amount started coming in. But then the number of chicken wranglers consistently started increasing, and they kind of just completely overwhelmed a ton of my Snapdragons in a couple of the lanes. So I did end up losing 2 of my lawnmowers, and then was forced to quickly regroup as I knew this final wave was gonna have more chicken wranglers. And as I saw them coming in, I planted a Snapdragon in the top middle lane and then tried to heavily rely on my plant food, but then a couple of chickens snuck past in the bottom middle lane and a chicken made it to the end, making for my very first loss in this entire challenge. But I knew that this level was definitely still beatable if I just used my plant food a little better. So when I jumped into my second attempt, the very first thing I changed was my placement of the Snapdragon, and instead of placing it sort of in the middle-ish area, I decided to place my first column in the very back, because this would basically just allow me to stall longer and collect more sun. And this time, when that overwhelming horde of the chicken wranglers came in, I basically had 3 Snapdragons in every single lane. And this time, I was able to better utilize my plant food to protect as many lawnmowers and Snapdragons as possible, which basically, when the final wave came in, guaranteed our win because we still had all of our lawnmowers intact. But as you can see, using a plant food, we didn't really even need to make use of the lawnmowers, and day 14 had been beat. The next threatening, and I'd probably even argue the most difficult level of the Wild West with the Snapdragon, was day 18. It's basically a prepare your defenses level, which did allow me to get down 2 columns of Snapdragons immediately, but then it just consistently starts sending in an insane amount of chicken wranglers, and the Snapdragon's normal attack just isn't enough to deal with all of them. So we have to use our plant food and time it in the correct way so we don't lose many of our Snapdragons, but also so we don't overuse the plant food. Because if you look at the bottom left, you'll see that this level we needed to actually use our coins, as the level itself just didn't give us enough plant food to work with. And as soon as we approached the final wave, I'd actually used the last of my coins and had 2 more plant food left. And basically what I needed to do here was make sure that I'd at least hit all of the chicken wranglers once, so that the lawnmowers would be able to take care of all the zombies if needed. Because if a chicken wrangler makes it to the end and hits a lawnmower, the chickens actually end up spawning afterwards and defeating you anyways. But the Snapdragons, with the help of some plant food, were able to defeat the final wave, and we barely made it past day 18 with 500 coins left. And we still had a level like day 23 to go up against, where we have to protect these flowers in the middle from being trampled on, and if you look in the top left-ish, we can only lose 2 plants. And like you most likely already know, this level also has chickens in it. So again, of course, my strategy stayed the same, where I stalled the first couple of zombies as long as possible to get more sun, eventually getting a Snapdragon in every single lane before a chicken wrangler even came out. And the first chicken wrangler that came in, I knew I was gonna have to plant food since I didn't have enough Snapdragons to completely deal with it. But by the time more came in, I did have 2 columns of Snapdragons, so I was a little bit more confident, especially because the 2 columns, or the second column, kind of acted as a barrier and gave me more time to use my plant food if I needed, especially in situations like the very top lane where a bunch of chickens just hoarded my Snapdragon. But I had just enough time to get down to plant food, and very unexpectedly I was actually able to beat this level normally without having to spend any extra coins on plant food. But as unexpected the win was on day 23, there was also a very unexpected loss on day 24. I mean, I was already positive that this level was going to be annoying as I had to protect the 3 walnuts up front, and again, the level has chicken wranglers, so due to my placements of the Snapdragon being in the very back, if a chicken wrangler got let loose very up front, I knew that the chickens that got out could very quickly eat away at my walnuts. So I was having to make sure that I maneuvered my walnuts around so that the chicken wranglers wouldn't touch them, because if you're unfamiliar, the chicken wranglers, if they touch a plant, they let the chickens out. It doesn't even have to be that they're actually getting attacked by a plant. And for the most part, I was actually doing pretty well with getting the chickens through to the very end, and then my columns of Snapdragons were able to take them out. I was even getting Snapdragons down far up front to defend the walnuts better, but then one little problem occurred where a bunch of zombies came in at once, and if you look very far up front in the very middle lane, there was this one chicken wrangler that I completely missed come in, and that one chicken wrangler ended up touching the walnut, and the chickens that came out of it immediately ate through the walnut, making for another loss at first, but I knew that this was another level that was very much possible if I just had my placements better. So on the second attempt, I decided to use the Snapdragons in the very back column again, but this time it was only that one column instead of the double stack. And the second sort of layer of Snapdragons I decided to place very up front so I could defend the walnuts better. And this, though it was more problematic for the Snapdragons in the back because it allowed the chickens to get through, because the Snapdragons by themselves couldn't deal enough damage without that extra support from the second column, it did guarantee that my walnuts stayed safe. And eventually I made it to the final wave where things almost got extremely hectic because a bunch of chickens got all released at once, but thankfully one well-timed plant food was able to take most of them down. And then I was able to defend the top 2 lanes with another plant food, meaning that we'd beaten all of the Wild West using just a max level Volt Snapdragon. But let's see how it holds up against the ice storms of the Frostbite Caves. Genuinely, I went into thinking was going to be the hardest world compared to all the rest. Of course, mainly due to the snowstorms that sweep through and then freeze your plants. But honestly, it ended up not being that bad because even if one of your Snapdragons get frozen, you can just plant another one right behind it to unfreeze them. And of course, there's always that strategy of just shoveling your Snapdragons when they're half frozen if things are getting too dire. Even levels like day 11 where there's a bunch of windstorms ended up being much easier than expected, and I think it was mostly due to just how much damage the Snapdragon does, especially paired up with this pretty overpowered plant food effect. And days like day 15 are even easier as we're given support plants to unfreeze our plants whenever there's windstorms that sweep through. There's also levels like day 17 where there's already pre-frozen plants on the lawn, so you're able to just break the ice on them and then shovel them, getting even more sun to plant your Snapdragons down even faster, making things extremely simple. I say the only semi-challenging level within the Frostbite Caves was day 26 because it combines the weasel hoarders of the world with the ice storms. But like I've mentioned, you can just strategically shovel your Snapdragons when they're almost about to be frozen and then just replant them in the same exact spot. And doing this, you do lose a little bit of sun, but it's better than your Snapdragon completely being frozen. And that strategy completely avoids the ice storms. And as we already know, for zombies like the weasel hoarders, you can just use a plant food and completely dominate them. So using some pretty simple strategies, even a day like 26, which is supposed to be difficult, ends up being pretty easy. Day 27, we get to see Gargantuars just getting completely torched by the Snapdragons, and then we make it to day 28 of the Frostbite Caves, which is the last level that we play in this world. And I actually have a very close call in the very top lane where 2 of my Snapdragons got frozen and some weasel hoarders were about to make it past, but I got my Snapdragon down at the last second and plant fooded it, which thankfully took out the weasels, meaning we'd be in all of the Frostbite Caves using just a max level Snapdragon. But let's see how it performs in the Lost City, I'd say, is one of the easier worlds because it has the gold tiles, but at the same time it has the singular zombie that can completely avoid the Snapdragon's damage, which of course looking at the screen you can see is the shovel zombie. No matter how powerful the Snapdragon's beam gets, it can't penetrate through the shovel zombie's shovel, meaning you have 2 options to defeat the shovel zombie, one of which you just saw right there was the lawnmower, and the second option is just using your plant food ability. It's actually very good that the plant food ability does work on the shovel zombie because there is a level later on which completely requires it. And I'm actually going to just jump straight to the level because it was really the only one that required any focus. Because if you look towards the back, you'll see that there's more flowers that we have to protect from being trampled on. And this level, of course, has the shovel zombies, meaning we can't rely on the lawnmowers to take them down. Well, I actually am able to rely on one lawnmower since I'm able to launch 1 mower per level. But after that 1 mower launch, I can't really use any of the mowers. And all the other shovel zombies, we're going to have to be dealt with using using plant food, which the level thankfully gives us plenty of. I'm not gonna lie, if the Snapdragon didn't have a pretty overpowered plant food ability that can damage all the zombies in the game, we probably would have lost a while back. But anyways, looking back at the levels, day 26 of Lost City is an interesting one since it only gives us one gold tile to work with compared to the multiple in basically every other level. But even one gold tile is more than enough since it's more sun production than all the other worlds. The only annoyance would be the shovel zombies since we wouldn't have a lot of sun to keep stalling them, but this level only sends in 2 in total, so they weren't very threatening either. Which takes us to the last scary level of Lost City and also just the last level that we play in the Lost City, day 30. And the scary part is the mold colonies covering the 3 back columns combined with the shovel zombies. But again, the plant food ability of the Snapdragon comes in very clutch, taking out the shovel zombies right when we need it to. And eventually I'm just able to overpower all the zombies, meaning we have now beaten all of the Lost City using just a max level Snapdragon. So let's see how it performs in the far future. I'm just going to be super speeding past because if you're unfamiliar, the only difficult zombies in the far future are just the extremely tanky ones like the Robocone mech and the All-Star mech, and also of course the Gargantuar. And like I've mentioned multiple times throughout the video, the Snapdragon specializes in taking out tanky zombies, so those guys are kind of just non-threats. They're actually almost just like basic zombies when you put them up against the max level Snapdragon. So just like that, we'd be in all of the far future using just the max level Snapdragon, and things actually don't get much more difficult in the Dark Ages. We of course get Goldblum to support us as there's no sun dropping naturally from the sky, and like we're all familiar, normally the most difficult zombie of the Dark Ages is the Jester, but the Snapdragon doesn't have any issues with it because the Jester can't bounce back the Snapdragon's projectile. So I'd argue that the real most difficult zombie of the Dark Ages for the Snapdragon is the Wizard, but even the Wizard doesn't do enough to completely counter us, so we end up dominating the levels pretty easily. And the one interesting stop I'll make is night 17, and it's not because it's difficult, but mainly because it just spawns in these sun gravestones in the middle area and you're able to just farm up a crazy amount of sun. And by the end, I'd only used 1 gold bloom and nearly still had 3,000 sun in my bank. But flexing my sun aside, we had now made it to night 19, which is the last level that we play of the Dark Ages, where we have to protect these 3 magnet shrooms in the front. And normally the only problem within this level is the gestures that spawn in the lanes of the magnet shrooms, but as you saw there, they kind of just completely got decimated. And just like that, we'd beaten all of the Dark Ages using just a max level Snapdragon. Let's see how it performs in the Neon Mixtape Tour, and maybe you already expected it, was also very easy. The only semi-scary levels were the ones like these where you had to protect your plants, and there's 3 of them within the Neon Mixtape Tour, 2 of which are actually pretty easy, mainly because in those 2 they don't throw up the one problematic zombie who can be kind of terrifying, but I'll mention that guy when we get there, because for now we defended day 5 pretty easily, moving us on to the second Defend Your Plants level, which was on day 15, where there was a column of fat beets in the middle of the lawn, and this one can be a little scary because since you're protecting fat beets, you can't really stall for sun, meaning the zombies start coming in extremely fast and you kind of just have to go with the flow and can't really strategize. But with a couple of lucky plant foods as I planted my Snapdragons down, we're able to get our defenses down pretty easily and eventually successfully defended the fat beet. Oh, there actually was one level that was scary besides the Protect Your Plants one, and that was day 21. And like you've probably already noticed, there's more flowers that we have to protect from being trampled on. And I've probably already mentioned this, but this isn't really a Snapdragon problem that the flower levels are difficult, but it's more of just a sun cost problem, because any plant that we use in these max level videos that have a high sun cost usually always struggle with these levels since it's extremely difficult to have enough plants down to defend in time. And this level is especially scary because the Mohawk guys have some pretty decent speed, and I knew I wasn't going to get enough sun in time, so I had to make some pretty quick maneuvers to shovel 2 of my Snapdragons and then launch a mower to take out one of the Mohawks and then place a Snapdragon for the one at the bottom. And this is definitely a risky move, but it was one that was 100% needed because otherwise I would have lost. And I say it's risky because you don't really know where the zombies are going to come in next, and having 3 lanes open since I had just sold 2 of my Snapdragons means that we're more prone to lose. And it actually nearly happened in the bottom middle lane, but I was able to get down a Snapdragon last second, which left only the top lane without a Snapdragon, but thankfully I had 95 sun in the bank and very quickly got that last one down. Oh, and if you look at this Gargantuar, you'll see that the Zapdragon's beam does so much damage that the Garg doesn't even get a chance to throw his imp out. So that was pretty cool to see. And the rest of the level was very easily beaten, leading us into the third Protect Your Endangered Plants level, which is the main one that can be worrisome because of one particular zombie. And as you've probably already guessed, it's the Microphone Whipper. And to sort of even prevent the Microphone Whippers of getting a chance to attack the shrooms, we kind of have to let the Mohawks in the beginning kick them back, giving us more time and space to work with. Oh, and as soon as I saw the Microphone Whipper in the middle lane, I made sure to plant food and take him out. And then there are two more sent, one in the top middle lane and one in the bottom middle lane, but my Zapdragon's chain attack kind of just took him out, and I didn't have to use my plant food. And again, a scary level was made unscary, which does kind of just lead us into the final level of the Neon Mixtape Tour, which is day 30. And here the game sends in 3 Microphone Whippers right off the bat, and since they one-shot your Volt Snapdragons, I didn't want to lose and waste suns, so I let them just get by. And then when I could confidently see that they weren't going to hurt my Volt Snapdragons, I started placing them down, and this ended up working out pretty well because it ensured that I could get one down in all 5 lanes when all the zombies came in, and losing those 3 mowers in the back was a valid sacrifice. And just like that, we had beaten all of the Neon Mixtape Tour using just a max level Zapdragon. So let's see how it performs against the dinosaurs in the Jurassic Marsh, again, ended up being a world that wasn't too difficult, but there was a little bit of a strategy change where it basically just guaranteed that zombies were going to get to the end and take some lawnmowers at the beginning of the level. And this, of course, could have just been prevented if I placed my Zapdragons all the way in the back, but I was just trying to beat the levels as fast as possible, so I realized that sacrificing some lawnmowers helped greatly with this. And to be honest, besides that, everything else was pretty easy. The only tough level was day 25, which was the first level that the Ankylosaurus was introduced, and for some reason this level just starts off really fast, sending in an insane amount of zombies before you can really even do anything. And because of this, I ended up losing a ton of my lawnmowers right off the bat, and then there'd be some zombies that would make it towards the end in the lanes that didn't have the lawnmowers, so I'd have to shovel a Zapdragon to replace it with another one. And this was kind of just a strategy that I had to use throughout the level because things were getting a little hectic. But as soon as I got 2 Zapdragons, one in the bottom middle lane and one in the top middle lane towards the back, I knew that the level had been essentially beaten because if any zombies got towards the end, I could just plant food one of the Zapdragons to take them out, because thanks to the 3x3 range, it meant that they could cover all 5 lanes by themselves. And just like that, day 25 had been beaten, leading me to the last level that we play of the Jurassic Marsh, which is day 30. And you might be thinking I'm not really covering a lot of the levels, and that's mainly because I played over them, but there just wasn't anything interesting to talk about. It's basically just all the same things that we had already experienced. So just like that, we had beaten all of the Jurassic Marsh using just a max level Volt Snapdragon. But let's see how it performs in this. The Big Wave Beach, though it is a world known to be difficult, it actually ends up being pretty easy for the Volt Snapdragon, mainly because the zombies are extremely slow in the water, so it kind of just forces me to stall out every level, and I can kind of plant all my Volt Snapdragons wherever I need them and still have a ton of extra sun to work with. The only semi-annoying thing were the low tides that would come in out of nowhere, spawning zombies behind my plants, and due to this, I actually ended up losing all 5 of my mowers on day 6, but again, we do kind of just have solutions to everything. The real annoying zombies start coming in on day 17, the first of which was the Octo Zombie, but this guy can easily be countered if you just place 2 Volt Snapdragons back to back, because it's basically always going to target the Volt Snapdragon or any plant that's in front, meaning the Volt Snapdragon behind can just destroy the octopus. There are several levels within the Big Wave Beach that can be a little scary, and the first of which is day 23, where we have to protect these banana launchers in the back, mainly from the fishermen that are trying to hook them into the water, but making use of the banana launchers themselves and mainly the Volt Snapdragon, the fishermen can't really do much. And the only scary part again was the low tides, where a bunch of zombies would appear out of nowhere, and for these I would end up having to use a plant food to wipe out the zombies. And honestly, this worked pretty well. Day 25 was definitely a scary one when I first went into the level, because we have to defeat 10 zombies within 5 seconds, but then one plant food ability comboed with the mower unexpectedly ended up completing the task, and somehow it won, leading us to the last level that we play of the Big Wave Beach, which is day 30. And normally this is the scariest level, again mainly due to the fishermen, but as we already saw, the fishermen don't really stand a chance against the Volt Snapdragon, so this level ended up being pretty simple as well. And just like that, we'd beaten the entirety of the Big Wave Beach using just a max level Volt Snapdragon. So lastly, let's see how it performs in Modern Day genuinely has one difficult level, and it's probably not the one that you're thinking of, because normally it's day 30, which has been a level that a lot of the max level plants have lost to, but this time the scariest level of Modern Day is day 12, because this level combos up some pretty diabolical zombies, one of which is the shovel zombie, and the second one, if you look in the top 2 lanes, are the chicken wranglers. So I am kind of forced to buy plant food here, but thankfully I had a bunch of coins saved up from all the previous worlds, and I was eventually able to make it through on my first try. And like I mentioned, day 12 was the only semi-scary level, but I feel like we have to look at day 30 as well, just to see how it performs against the all-star zombies, and basically it performs pretty poorly unless you can time your plant foods well, because the Snapdragon's beam just doesn't tick fast enough to take out the all-stars, but if you do use a plant food, it does take them out fast enough. And using that knowledge, we made it past the difficult parts of the level pretty easily, eventually defeating it without much of a problem, meaning we made it to the last level of Modern Day and the last level of this entire challenge, which this level of course is a guaranteed win, as it's an easier level than a lot of the other levels that we've played in this challenge so far, meaning the new max level Volt Snapdragon was able to solo the entirety of PvZ2. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and let me know if you want me to do this challenge with any of the other newer plants, because if you look at all my other videos, I've mainly just been doing the older plants, semi-avoiding the newer ones, but this one seemed pretty cool, so I wanted to check it out. Alright, that's enough yapping from me. Okay, bye bye.